thought it was weird. And so I showed my friend, and we went to this conference where I met people who had these experiences, and they were telling me things that looked like a pattern match to what I was studying. So I thought, I'll go ahead and look at this a little bit further, but I didn't tell anybody. I was just kind of like doing an analysis. She said she saw this angel and it wasn't a vision, it was in reality. Like, you know, and she said that it was short and it was shiny, and she was confused because it didn't look like an angel. And she goes, well, it must be a cherub, right? So she had confusion about it. And it had a dart. And she said this dart it took and it basically put it in me, right?
How did the interest in the UFO stuff even happen?
Yeah, so I'm the last person, by the way, who would be talking about UFOs if you talked to me, 14 years ago. Nobody would say that I would be talking about UFOs. Anybody you talk to who knows me would, Diana's talking about UFOs. So this happened because of the Purgatory book. So I had created that log of aerial phenomena, historical aerial phenomena. And I thought it was weird. And so I showed my friend, and we went to this conference where I met people who had these experiences, and they were telling me things that looked like a pattern match to what I was studying. So I thought, I'll go ahead and look at this a little bit further, but I didn't tell anybody. I was just kind of like doing an analysis. And then I thought, this is interesting. It's basically a modern day ascent narrative, the ascent of the soul, right? So if you see images of like people being abducted or cows being abducted, you'll see the cow rising into, ascending into the spaceships, the people, the farmer being ascended. Well, you see the same thing with images of purgatory. You see like back, maybe not cows, of course, but, European Catholics will be ascending into their souls ascending, but it shows them ascending. So I thought this is like a modern day ascent narrative. I could use my methods for studying this, no problem. It won't discredit me to study this, right? So I started to do this study, and it was really interesting. And then what happened was I started to get emails and phone calls from aerospace engineers, people from known aerospace corporations and institutions. And they wanted to talk to me about my research that I was doing. I was like, what? Wait, I think you got the wrong person. No. So, and this kept happening. And I decided, okay, they wanted to meet with me. A couple of them wanted to meet with me. So I thought, okay, I'll meet with them, because why do they want to know about this angel event that happened in the 1800s?
How did they get wind of you? Were you writing papers?
I started to do conferences with the people that I know who are other professors of religion. And for us, it was like, modern day ascent narrative, easy to understand. But they would then somehow were scouring like the internet of any academic who is doing, the word UFO or anything like that. And that's how they found me. And once I was found, a lot of them reached out to me. And at first I was a little bit put off, because I thought, this is kind of odd. It kind of freaked me out, to tell you the truth. But I did start to talk to them. And one of them, I actually put him off for like a year and a half. I mean, I know it sounds weird, but I had 5 young kids and I was busy, right? So didn't make this connection. I thought it was weird. But when I started to talk to them, I recognized that they weren't looking at it like I was looking at it. They were looking at it like it actually happened. Whereas I was looking at it more like a metaphor. Like, this is their interpretation of something they saw in the sky. They wanted to know what they saw in the sky. They also wanted to know what kinds of things happened to these people. Like, were they injured? And a lot of times they were. And so that started to get me to like re-look at what I was doing. And I started to look at it from their perspective. And I was like, oh my gosh, I think that these things are probably real. And that was shocking. So I was shocked for a whole year. What I did was, thankfully I had a friend, Jeff Kripal at Rice University. And I shared all my stuff with him. And he was shocked too, by the way.
What was it? What was the turning point for you that made you think that this isn't metaphorical anymore?
Okay, so the turning point was when I met a person who I have to call Tyler, because he's anonymous. One of these people that, when I look back now, I recognize worked for one of these SAPs most likely. I can't prove it, but it looks like it. So he worked for...
Can you describe SAP?
Yeah,
for the
yeah.
audience,
So this
please?
it's called a special access program in the military, and he worked for an unacknowledged SAP. And he described his work as a hobby. This was in 2013. He described his work as a hobby. He had lots of clearances from different agencies, Department of Defense and like NASA, like a lot. And he worked as a mission controller, and he also worked as this. He was like a space shuttle. He worked in the space shuttle program for its duration until it ended. He was always at a launch of the space shuttle. He also did scientific stuff. So he was this character that I didn't quite understand when I first met him. And he really wanted to know the data. So he wanted to know, he really was interested in any work that I would do at the Vatican. And he was also interested in any work that I did that had to do with consciousness. Because he said that in his field, he said, consciousness is the next step. That's where we are studying. And that's why we're interested in your work. And so, again, I was really slow to work with him because I was concerned. You know, I was like, concerned about what it would mean for my life. It might change my life, you know, and it did. It did change my life. So that's what changed, is that I started to look at the Catholic tradition again from a new lens. So I had looked at like Teresa of Avila is this nun who lived in the 1500s, and she had an experience with one of these seraphs, like, or an angel, right? But she didn't call it an angel at first. So I went back and I looked at these experiences that these people had, that we now, when we look at them, we see the nice prayer cards, and it looks really like a sweet kind of encounter that they had. But really, the encounter, when you read the primary source material that you see in the archives, it looks really different than how it's represented. And that was shocking to me because...
Which archives?
Okay, so there are two main archives that hold... There's lots of different archives, but the ones that hold lots of information about this, first is the Vatican Archive, and the Vatican, it used to be called the Vatican Secret Archive, but it's called the Apostolic Archive, and it's the Pope's archive. And you can't just go to that. You have to actually have certain credentials to get into it. And so I have those credentials. So I was able to go there, and I was able to look at the primary source material for some of the saints in the Catholic and Christian tradition that looked like had angel events or levitated and had anomalous activity. And I was able to look at that and assess the primary source data on my own, which is really fascinating. Yeah. So I did that work, and
can you name one of the saints, or maybe?
All of the saints. So once you start to look at the saints, you see that what is said about what was said in the there are what are called primary source material. This would be some of the first material that comes out about that experience that saint had. Teresa of Avila wrote her own experience. That's what makes it so important, is that she wrote about it. It was later what's called redacted. It was changed by the church. She said she saw this angel, and it wasn't a vision, it was in reality. Like, you know, and she said that it was short and it was shiny, and she was confused because it didn't look like an angel. And she goes, well, it must be a cherub, right? So she had confusion about it. And it had a dart. And she said this dart it took and it basically put it in me, right? So this looks like modern day UFO abduction reports. And so once you start to see those connections, you cannot unsee them. And you're like, okay, got it. This is different than how it's represented in the prayer card, right? Where it's beautiful. And I hope that I'm not offending the Catholics that are looking at this, and, you know, because it's their childhood. They were brought up with these images.
How do you know it was redacted?
Oh, because we have the redactions.
So do you have the original transcripts as well?
Yeah, I have those.
Why would they redact it?
It didn't conform to their theology.
So
it happens all the time. It even happens today.
I mean, I know it happens in government all the time. No matter where you're watching Shawn Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.